All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us live today for our fifth episode of Talk Data to Me. Today's topic is 5 steps for an effective data security strategy. My name is Steve Banda, and I'm the host of today's show. I'm grateful to be joined by Lookout's very own David Richardson, otherwise known as DR. DR is the Vice President of Product Management at Lookout, overseeing product strategy for our mobile and our cloud security solutions. Welcome, DR, and thank you very much for joining us today. To
It's a
kick
pleasure to
things
be
off,
here.
yeah, DR, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us. And what I want to do is, I really want to kick this thing off with a basic question. Can you tell us why protecting data in the cloud is so hard?
Yeah. There's a number of factors that obviously play into this. First and foremost, IT infrastructure has become really increasingly complicated. You've got on-prem resources that might live in an office somewhere. You've got SaaS services, you've got public clouds, you've got private clouds, and these things all generally need to be able to send and communicate data back and forth between one another. But they all just live in such disparate systems. So it's become, increasingly difficult even just to understand where your data lives these days. Like, where is your most sensitive data? Like, is it in email? Is it in Salesforce? Is it in Tableau? Is it, it could be in a variety. Is it Office 365? Is it customer databases? Those kinds of things. Every organization might have a different answer about what really matters the most and where their most sensitive data lies. And then, if you couple all of the different places where your data lives with the fact that those all have different tools with different controls associated with them, you can kind of feel sometimes like you have no control over your data that's in the cloud. As you move things to SaaS services, maybe they're now suddenly accessible by unmanaged devices. Maybe if you're traveling for the holidays and you need to check something work related and you use the big iMac that's in the living room or something like that in a shared device to access that data, maybe you can get in and access that, even though maybe a corporate policy might say that you can't. But because it's SaaS and because you've got a username and a password and an MFA token, you can get in and log in from that device and access that data from anywhere. Because of the nature that it's moved to the cloud, which is, both a good thing and a bad thing, because you don't know about the security status of the device. And then the last part is, data shared in a very different way in the cloud. We built our data protection and data security strategies around the idea of like what should be able to be downloaded or what should be able to be uploaded. And we have almost what I would call like a hard drive centric strategy of like monitoring, bits and bytes written to hard drives. But these days, if I want to share something with you, I probably click share in a SaaS service and I type in an email address, and I might autocomplete your personal email address instead of your work email address and click send. And I never downloaded anything. It never touched my hard drive. It never went through my email through like a secure email gateway or anything like that. And it arrived for you to be able to go and access that data without it ever being, downloaded to your machine either. You're gonna, log in and access that, from whatever device you choose to do so. So it's just all gotten way more complicated. It's also great from like a usability and enablement perspective. Like it's far simpler as an end user to work in this world, but it's far more difficult as a IT administrator or a CISO to know where my data lives and know how it's being shared, within the organization or outside of the organization.
Yeah, no, thanks for that recap. I mean, it really is a new world that we live in right here. I mean, I think that to say it kind of in a nutshell, people are everywhere, data is everywhere. We
Hmm.
communicate, when we need to, however we need to, using whatever device we want. And it's a great benefit to the end user, but absolutely very difficult from a management standpoint, security standpoint, to get that like full view and perspective of where your data is, because it is really in every corner of the world in a way. So it's bringing that together and getting that insight and control that's necessary to safeguard your organization. And I think you put that perfectly, described it very well. So, with this in mind, what would you say, where the title of this session is really those 5 steps to building an effective data
Yep.
security strategy. So if we had to, jump into the first one, what would you say is the first step for starting to build that strategy?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the first step is really to secure your endpoints, your unmanaged endpoints and your managed endpoints. You hinted at the rapid mass adoption of remote work that we've all obviously lived through over the last 2 years and change. As a result of that, 66% of IT professionals saw an increase in security incidents and requests due to remote work. So remote work, and this is from a Ivanti remote worker survey. Um, Remote work creates more possibilities for incidents and creates more workload, which causes the teams to also be more stressed and more thinly spread. So they have less resources to be able to adopt these to be able to protect the organization and quickly deploy new strategies and tools as needed. But you really need to think about, okay, what are all of the devices that my employees are able to access corporate data from, and how can I make sure that those devices are secure? So in the case of like a managed Windows or Mac laptop, you're going to be deploying various security technology to those, endpoint security capabilities and other tools there to take those devices under management to ensure that they're up to date, that the software on them is not just the operating system but the individual applications that you deploy are up to date. But you need to think about that also for your unmanaged devices, and especially like mobile devices and tablets that are being used increasingly by pretty much everyone for work on a day-to-day basis. You're starting to view these devices as an employee. You're viewing these devices more as a screen or a window into data, as opposed to like, you know I do this kind of work on my work laptop and I do this kind of work on my mobile device. They're all just screens. You're consuming content from all these screens. And you have to make sure that you're securing these devices. And when it comes to securing unmanaged devices, I mean, that's a really fine line that you need to walk, because you have to really be concerned about privacy considerations of those devices. So you want to know that this device complies with your policies without being able to see what location the device is at 24/7, without being able to monitor every single usage of that device. So it really takes it takes straddling a fine line to be able to do that successfully. But you shouldn't ignore those unmanaged devices and just assume that they can't access data. If you have data in the cloud, they probably can access that data.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, when I think about this, the managed and unmanaged device situation, I agree. There's a good, really a good point. I mean, it's a good logical first step. I've been using my own mobile device, for work for years, and I actually can't imagine it any other way. I mean, I think from like a lifestyle perspective, it's enough to manage a personal life, so it's very handy to have it all consolidated to one device. At the same time, definitely don't want my employer having that direct insight into my personal life. So I think this starts to call to the surface this balance that organizations have to really start to strike. That security,
Mhm.
the privacy component. How do they really enable their hybrid workforce to use any device they need in an unmanaged
Mhm.
fashion, but securely, and can access the data they need when they need it. So it's a very good point. So Dr. With the time we have, I'm going to move a little bit quickly onto the next one here.
Sure.
What's step 2 for building an effective data security strategy?
Yeah, yeah. So it's really to provide dynamic access to devices based on continuous risk assessment. So the typical way that authentication works is you say a user has they are who they say they are. They have their username and password, and they have their MFA token. So let them in and let them access whatever they want. But risk changes continuously. I might have connected in a secure environment, and then I might have walked into a coffee shop and connected to their Wi-Fi network, which might not be deemed a secure environment. And but because I did the authentication while I was outside on my LTE connection, maybe that was you were allowed in for that reason. So you need to be kind of doing a continuous risk assessment, um, and you need ways to be able to also get someone kick someone out of your system and force them to re-auth or connect from another location. You also need to monitor user behavior as part of this, right? If somebody, just because somebody should have access to Salesforce doesn't mean you should continue to give them access to Salesforce if they are suddenly logging in at 2 in the morning from a location they've never been accessed it from before, from a device they've never accessed it from before, and start downloading, all of the customer records. That should affect the risk level of the user. That should, eventually trigger alerts and thresholds to, prevent that user from being able to access further data.
No, very good. I mean, and I'm glad you bring this up because, bringing this to the surface, this is stuff that really happens behind the scenes, right? And no one thinks about it, but to me, I've always thought about security. Security needs to match the environment that is securing, right? So we think about the dynamic nature of how we work today. Well, your security needs to be dynamic as well in how it, assesses risk on a continuous basis. So very interesting, and all the inputs behind there, anomaly detection, very much that you hit on there, key components. So absolutely, glad you highlighted that. So let's move on to the next one. So step 3, DR.
Sure.
What do you
Yeah.
got?
So step 3 is to secure access to your private apps. So private apps being, homegrown applications, anything that's on-prem, anything that's in a private cloud or private data center. Traditionally, you access these things through a VPN, and the VPN is sort of a all or nothing. Once you have access into the VPN, you can access all of the servers, all of the local machines that are in that same private network. But these days, increasingly organizations are adopting a more modern approach. It's called zero trust network access. According to Gartner, there's actually been a 60%, or there will be a 60% year-over-year growth rate of ZTNA from 2019 to 2025. So this is definitely something that is being very rapidly adopted by organizations. And the difference between traditional VPN and zero trust network access, I mean, there's a number of differences, but I would say the primary difference is a VPN gives you full access into the network, it lets you act as if you walked into the office and plugged into an Ethernet port there, or connected directly to the Wi-Fi there. So you can see all the printers, all the servers, all the things that you could do if you were in the office. A zero trust network access, by contrast, gives you narrow access to specific services. So it lets you access that private app, or access that printer that you need access to, or access that file storage that you need access to, without giving you access to everything, only what you should be able to access. And it has the ability to incorporate these dynamic risk controls that we were talking about in the previous step as well, to go and sever that connection. If you look at the majority of breaches that are occurring these days, it is usually somebody gets access to the network somehow. So they get a VPN credential and they manage to successfully log in, and that's how they exfiltrate data. So that's why zero trust network access is being seen as an alternative approach to VPN, that allows you to still actually improve the user experience in the process, but prevent the fear of someone getting access to one system, meaning they can move laterally and access all of the data that's in my in my private data centers.
Yeah, so it seems to me, DR, I mean, it does obviously pointing in the direction of VPNs kind of going away in favor of zero
Mhm.
trust network access, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, the benefits from security are there, user experience benefit is there as well, and then of course there's a management simplicity as well on the back end for maintaining these systems. So definitely that seems to be a movement that is absolutely in motion, and point of no return is almost there. Um,
Yep.
all right, so moving on here, we have step number 4.
Yeah. So step 4 is to protect users from hidden threats in internet traffic. So you just need to recognize it's a reality these days. Like, people need to be able to browse the public internet in order to be able to get their job done, whether they're at home or they're in the office, or they're or somewhere in between. And there are a lot of threats out there. You're receiving, probably text messages on a, weekly or monthly basis telling you that like a package was failed to be able to be delivered, and click here to reschedule it. So these are ways that attackers will try to compromise devices, and by either phishing information from them or delivering an exploit to that device in order to gain further access into the system. So organizations really need to think about deploying phishing and content protection solutions or secure web gateways, so that they can what's the filter through and classify what's the good traffic, what's the bad traffic, and be able to enforce acceptable use policies about how machines should and shouldn't be able to be used. That are really dependent on each and every organization.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this one must, hit home with everyone. Everyone really, everyone uses the internet. And I think especially around this time of year, as you mentioned, I mean, it's, through text message or email, constantly getting, package deliveries. And, it starts to become very difficult to decipher which ones are real, which ones aren't. I definitely encourage everybody to pause. I think that's like the first line of defense, is getting to that point where you can kind of recognize, wait a minute, something's up with this specific message. So really, interesting there. And I think the other thing I like to raise is, and maybe I'm the only one that does this, but if I have which I'm sure I'm not, if I have a random idea, there's a good chance that I could go find it on the internet, right? So if I want to go to a search engine and I say, hey, I want to search for, maybe it's a specific gift I had in mind, or a recipe, or an invention. Who knows? Does it exist? You might land on some website. That website, you have no way of really knowing for sure, is that a malicious website that somebody has just pushed up there for you, right? So I think there's a lot of risk out there. Everybody should be, very careful, and obviously it's essential to have this coverage from your endpoint, your mobile device, phishing coming through text messages, all the way through your traditional endpoints, laptops, and so forth. So
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah. On that one, I'll say also, like, the attackers really stay on top of trends. So they know what people are searching for, and they know what it's hard to find content about. So, setting up, fake sites to receive, like, financial relief checks, or those kinds of things, where, those are places where it makes sense that I'm going to be asked for a whole bunch of private information in order to go and request that kind of financial relief.
yeah, and I know we've, obviously a lookout, we kind of see it all, right? And we've seen, the banking overlays, over
Mhm.
login screens that look identical. So
Yep.
definitely a real threat out there, and worth absolutely protecting, building a strategy around. All right, well that does bring us to our final point. I think we're doing okay
Okay.
on time. Step 5. What do you have?
Yeah. So step 5 is to gain control over unsanctioned SaaS apps, or sometimes this is referred to as shadow IT as well. I want to be clear here that I'm talking about gaining control and not blocking these things, right? So the first step is really to get visibility into what are all of the services that your employees are using. So you can analyze like your traffic logs, proxy logs, those kinds of things, and come to a conclusion of, okay, these are all of the different SaaS services that are being adopted by my employees. So you might actually be surprised to discover that there's a pocket of employees in finance that have started using a new tool that you didn't know about. Maybe sales has started using like something like Calendly to book appointments, and offer up the slots that they have available. Maybe your design team has started using something like Figma or FigJam behind the scenes, even though it's not necessarily like the sanctioned tool to be used. So the first step is really like gain an inventory of these things, understand like what's out there, what's being used, what you have control over, and what you don't have control over. And then find a way. I always like to see security as a business enabler. Find a way to enable a secure way to use these services. So, for example, you could say, you could identify, hey, we need a whiteboard collaboration tool, and the different pockets of the organization are using different things. Let's standardize on something. Let's allow everyone to use it, and let's bring that in as a sanctioned SaaS app and put the right controls in place so that you don't have to worry about what data is going in and out of that. Or you could say, for example, maybe it's fine for your employees to download all the data that they want to out of Dropbox, as long as they're not uploading any data to it. So you can create policies like that and say, hey, if people are sharing data with your employees via Dropbox, that's fine, but maybe that's not your sanctioned, file sharing service. So you just block and control like the uploads of applications. I think many people kind of take this as a kind of all or nothing approach and just say, I'm going to block all shadow IT. I'm just going to, prevent all of these applications from being accessed. I don't really think that that's a realistic approach. And I think that that leads to cultural problems as well, where security becomes seen as something that blocks the business from being able to get its job done, as opposed to something that enables the business to securely get the job done.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I like to use the phrase like secure productivity. I mean, I think it's like, really summarizes the ultimate goal. And, to your point about data, leakage to the internet and to applications that may just be personal and not seen by the organization. So one thing that, I've been protected against, fortunately here, Lookout, but making that simple mistake of, thinking you're uploading to say your Google Drive corporate instance, but actually maybe you were logged into your personal instance. It looks the same, unless you've
Mhm.
set your background to be different. But that's just an honest mistake. Those things happen. So having that protection in place that says, "Oh wait a minute, wrong instance. You can use this app, but wrong instance." So hey, direct to your personal one, your corporate one is a big benefit. But yeah, I think I would say for organization, I know secure web gateways have been around for forever, right? Many organizations have maybe moved theirs to the cloud. Many may still have them on premise. I think for those that will ultimately, almost inevitably, move their Swig solutions to the cloud, I think you need to really think about that data protection component on the outbound side. Make sure that you can prevent data leakage to the internet, because that's really when we think about the impact there, it's pretty drastic, large potential. But well,
Yeah,
that gives us,
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, DR, I mean, I really want to say, I appreciate your time here. That covers all 5 points that I think you wanted to lay out. Um, I also, want to thank the audience for their time. I mean, please, comment online if you have any additional questions. Also, there's a link in there if you want to follow up with us. So, definitely appreciate your time. And, I look forward to the next episode. And I want to wish everybody happy holiday season. Take care, everyone.